That was Old Megadeth with Mechanics off of Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. And Censorship Duck did not do his job during that song, apparently. And before that, Sky Harbor off of their disc Sunshine Dust. The song was called Menace. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. This has been a jumbled up version of Mostly Metal and the Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action Program. And before this hour ends, I'm going to try to squeeze in this week's episode of Ken's Dark Corner. Welcome back. This is Ken's Dark Corner here on WVLP, a little inset into Mostly Metal. I have about 10 minutes before the top of the hour, and I've got to shut down here and go over to Punk Rock Radio on WVLP. This episode of Ken's Dark Corner, it's the 7th one. I've decided to start talking about horror films that I've watched and like, and maybe give some recommendations, because what the heck, I have a microphone and so I can do this. This week's episode I've titled Amazombies, because I got down into that rabbit hole on Amazon Prime Video where you watch a movie and then one of the options is customers also watched it, and you get to go see other movies that are sort of like the one you just finished. And man, that rabbit hole goes deep. And so I came up with a whole string of zombie films from the 70s and 80s. A couple of them I'd seen before and others that I had not. And let's talk about a few. So maybe 1 minute each at best. But this is what I watched in the last couple of weeks, and I've got some recommendations for you if you like horror films and if you have Amazon Prime. And if not, you can still find access to these movies. It's just not, included in your price of admission. So, of course, to start it all off, it was Night of the Living Dead, released in 1968, directed by George Romero. That's the one that kind of started off the modern-day zombie craze. This is available on Amazon Prime just to watch without any extra charges. It's a black and white film, and it's, like I said, it's sort of the seminal zombie movie that people started trying to follow with their own entries in the zombie genre afterwards. So this one starts off with a cryptic announcement on the radio about something strange happening and a couple of people going to a cemetery, and then a zombie comes around and attacks them, and then one of them runs to a house to try to hide, and then other people come to the house. And so it's sort of an us against them setup, where for the vast majority of the movie there are a few people inside a farmhouse. They're boarding it up, and the zombies are on the outside of the house trying to get in, and it goes from there. Some of the sort of dated aspects of this are really interesting to watch. So, for example, it's in black and white, and when there is zombie on human or human on human violence, there's really no effects to speak of, like cutaways. You never see any direct impacts, unlike what you would see today in zombie movies. So it's not really gory. It's intense and it's creepy. However, in the scenes where they finally show the zombies doing what they do and chowing down on the people that they've eaten out in the graveyard and around the house, it's pretty gruesome. And it was interesting to watch that contrast between the person-to-person violence and the culinary violence of zombies eating intestines and things like that, which they did show. This movie has the longest 20-minute segment of people arguing about whether to hide in a cellar or not, and I thought that detracted from the movie. One character says, "We should all hide in the cellar," and the other character says, "No, we're safer up here," and then they basically just say that over and over to each other for the next 15 minutes, and that kind of slows the movie down a bit, but there is a point to it. This movie also has a great ending. If you haven't seen it yet, I won't say anything about it, but the final minute of this film is tremendous. So if you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, it has its flaws, but it is a classic, and you should go check it out. The best movie of this whole bunch that I watched, I mentioned last week too. It's called Zombie. It was released in 1979. It's an Italian film directed by Lucio Fulci. It's called Zombie in the States. It was also known as Zombie 2 in other parts of the world. I'm not quite sure what Zombie 1 was. It opens with an abandoned boat floating into a harbor in New York City, and the boat gets investigated by, I don't remember if it was the Coast Guard or something like that, and fun times ensue. And once that happens, the action shifts as people go to investigate the source of this, which is in the Caribbean. So a good portion of the rest of the movie takes place on an island where people are walking around trying to figure out what's going on in terms of whether this was voodoo or something like that. It has a classic scene that features an underwater battle between a zombie and a shark. And if you haven't seen this, you just have to go watch it. So this movie is loaded with gruesome effects. It's really, really intense, an awesome soundtrack, and it's probably one of my favorite zombie movies out there. And it's just called Zombie. And on Amazon Prime, you can't miss it because the cover of the box of the film that's shown in the searching screen just has a rotting zombie head. Another one I looked at was called City of the Living Dead, also known as The Gates of Hell. This came out in 1980, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was in high school in 1980, and this was sort of the heyday, the glory days of Italian European zombie films. This came out in 1980. I remember seeing this movie at a drive-in. I was attracted to it. I remember by the gruesome image of a zombie head in the newspaper. Being a teenager, it seemed a little bit, dangerous, quote unquote, to go see a movie like this in the cinematic sense, living on the edge. And I didn't realize at the time that I was living in the golden age of zombie movies. But this one starts out with a priest hanging himself in suicide, and then that act somehow opens up the gates of hell, and zombies start arising, and again, fun times ensue. During this movie, at the beginning, there's the place where the priest does this is in a town called Dunwich. H.P. Lovecraft fans will recognize that. Over in New York City, a psychic is having a seance with a group of people, and she goes into a fit and basically reports that she's seen the priest has died and opened up the gates of hell. And so she ends up hooking up with an investigator who go to Dunwich and try to figure out what's going on. The man that plays this other lead character is named Christopher George, and he's one of those people that you'll see him, and if you watched any TV in the 70s, you will have seen him before, from Charlie's Angels to SWAT to The Love Boat. He was all over the place, so it's a very, very familiar face, and it's kind of strange to see somebody that was on The Love Boat now being in a very gruesome horror film. But again, in the States, it was mostly called The Gates of Hell. On Amazon Prime, it is called City of the Living Dead, and I can recommend this as well. The thing that bugged me about it was that this location, Dunwich, is played off in the movie when they're trying to find it as this mysterious location, like they have to drive into the woods of New England and ask where this mysterious town is that's not on a map, and they get cryptic directions that you have to go to this country road and go around the landslide and you'll finally get to the town, which makes you think it should be just a tiny little village, but it's a huge city. It has its own police force, its own television station or radio station. It has brownstone developments. And so it just doesn't, it's really weird that this off the beaten paths village that nobody ever goes to has these huge metropolitan features to it. And that kind of takes you out of it once in a while. But otherwise, I can also recommend that movie. Burial Ground, also from 1980. This movie is also called The Nights of Terror. In this movie, a professor is doing some digging around in an underground crypt, and he manages to open the wrong panel and wipe off the wrong runes or something, and he ends up waking up the dead. And this place where the professor was active is near a villa. This takes place in the European hills, I think in Italy, because almost all of these are Italian. And so then the zombies start approaching this villa that has all the different people in it, and fun times occur. So this movie is sort of like Night of the Living Dead, is set in a single location where people are in or around the house trying to get away from the zombies. This also has lots and lots of nice gruesome effects, and so I recommend it. Zombie Creeping Death, also released in 1980. A lot of these movies have a name in Europe, and then a different name was upon release in the States. This one has multiple names. So on Amazon Prime, it's called Zombie Creeping Death. It has also been referred to as Zombie Inferno, Night of the Zombies, Hell of the Living Dead. So there you go. This movie starts when there's a chemical leak in a processing plant for foodstuffs. There's some kind of accident there which starts an infestation that results in zombies coming to life. It takes place in Papua New Guinea. And so this is one of those movies, kind of like Cannibal Holocaust, if you've heard of that one, where the people investigating what's going on go to this Caribbean island and find out weird things are happening, and then fun times ensue, just like all these other movies. Like Cannibal Holocaust, this movie interlaces actual archival footage of tribal groups on these islands and some of their rituals with the fictionalized actions of the main characters. And sometimes it's really interesting, and sometimes it doesn't quite work. So I don't know if this one gets as strong of a recommendation as the others, but what the heck, it's free. Nightmare City. This is one that I'd never heard of until I went down the rabbit hole of Amazon Prime. Nightmare City from 1980, also known as City of the Walking Dead, also known as Invasion by the Atomic Zombies. This one's a little bit different because here the zombies are fast. They run. They can use tools and guns. They know how to do it. The scope of this movie is so much different. It's not a fixed location. This takes place spanning over an entire city. You get to see hordes of zombies from a helicopter. There's zombies invading a TV station while it's on the air. All sorts of interesting things going on in that movie and in lots of different locations. Sorry, I got distracted by the computer because my time is almost out here, so I'm going to speed it up. So like I said, I'd never heard of this one, and I definitely recommend this as well. This one was really cool. Another one that it's a middle recommendation is called The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue. This was released in 1974. It's also known as Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. This movie is in basically a fixed location. It doesn't have many zombies in it. It wins the award for the most unlikable lead ever in a zombie movie. The lead character is a total jerk. The movie's interesting because the number of killings by zombies is pretty small, and it's sort of a cat and mouse game between the lead character and the person he's running around with, who know what's going on with the zombies, and police who are investigating killings, and they think that these characters have been doing the killings, and they can't get the police to believe that it's zombies, and so they're trying to stay ahead of the police while they figure out how to stop the zombies, while the police are chasing these people thinking that they commit the murders. It actually had a nice little structure to it. But all in all, I'd say, if you're only going to watch 2 or 3 of these, I would say go for Night of the Living Dead, Zombie from 1979, City of the Living Dead, and either Burial Ground or Nightmare City. Heck, they're all good. Go check them out. My time is up. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. This has been Ken's Dark Corner. I'm sorry it's been a rush job. Maybe I'll figure out a way to sneak some of this information back next week. But anyway, you're listening to 103.1 FM WVLP in Valparaiso, Indiana, and here comes Punk Rock Radio.